Hello everyone, as indicated by the title of the video, we'll be doing a ranking list based on the first impressions of the final levels of Darkest Dungeon, and obviously the overall difficulty once you know things you go through it a second or third time. By now you should know there's going to be super spoilers ahead, so please don't continue if you haven't played the final level / don't want any of the bosses ruined or enemies. This is not a guide, this is not theory crafting whatever. You're going to see footage of bosses, maps, areas, how to beat them, all that stuff. So if you don't want that ruined, please click out of the video now. Finally, my last word of warning, I did have to pull some of this footage from older videos, so some of the sound will be out, but I will have background music going and all that, so if things don't seem to line up quite correctly, that's why. First impressions, Darkest Dungeon 4, easiest first impression. The last level of the Darkest Dungeon. It is by far the easiest at its first impression. No map to walk through really, and the fights within the dungeon itself are not particularly grueling, especially through all those phases. Out of all those phases, the most difficult one is the second phase, and that's really due to the fact that the boss hangs out typically in row 4 to 3 a lot, but as soon as he comes to row even 2, you can typically start smashing him, the ancestor, with all the abilities you got. This boss does have a lot of HP, but if you have a lot of battle increase stuff, you just use it in the very first round and it continues over to all phases, which makes this fight practically more of a long one rather than more of a difficult one. The boss doesn't do anything particularly devastating until obviously you get to come unto your maker, where he will just instantly death blow if you have more than 2 people. Outside of that, there's not much this boss does, and there's even a phase before you get to the Heart of Darkness where you can actually recover some HP, which is really nice. First impression, level 1 Darkest Dungeon, medium. The first level of the Darkest Dungeon definitely delivers in terms of difficulty, but for its first impression it is easier than the following two for obvious reasons. The map itself is not huge, so getting lost isn't necessarily something that's going to happen easily or even frequently. It is very possible to wander into the boss with a pretty efficient rate. If you just keep heading right in a relative direction and you don't ever chance up or down a lot, you'll hit the boss no issue. The boss itself can be kind of difficult to bring down if you obviously bring a static party along. Now what I will say is hindsight is always 20/20, which we'll talk about once we get to the actual which dungeons are harder. But the boss is called the Shuffling Horror, so gives it away just a little bit what it's going to do to your party the whole time. Overall though, this is certainly no cakewalk despite being ranked second and the easiest for first impressions. Darkest Dungeon level 3, hard. This one came close to first, but technically there are a few ways this could end better for you than obviously the next one coming up. Since you really only need to hit one room, it is possible for you to stumble upon it quicker than the second Darkest Dungeon, since that one will require you to do more. Also, you have 3 campfires, therefore more buffs, more HP, and more stress heals can happen, and you can manage your party decently well with strong camp buffs as well, since you don't need to prepare for nighttime ambushes. That allows you 4 extra points that can be used towards buffs or stress healing, which is massive. And depending on where you go, some of the hall fights are actually not that bad either, so some of the hall fights are fairly easy to walk through, especially if you're pretty jacked up on campfire buffs. Now you might say, with all that being said, why is the second dungeon harder? That's because this map is huge. The only dungeon in the game with literally the label of exhausting. And to be honest, that's kind of what this dungeon can be the very first time through. Now, once again, some people may have very different memories of this place. Some of you might remember being teleported around everywhere, not sure which room you have to kill to, just trying to kill stalks the whole time and ending up in parts of the map you haven't even known existed yet. Or there may be some of you saying, you know what, I took about 7 to 8 fights and I ended up in the room and finished it within about 20 minutes, and that is certainly a possibility as well. So as I said, it could be the longest dungeon for some of us, and also the most disorienting one due to obviously the teleporting. Without prior knowledge of what the Siths do and what the Cell Stalks do, they can actually do a decent amount of damage, and the most obvious thing, just keep throwing you around the map whenever you're not ready. But definitely the size of this place and just trying to find one room can be very difficult. Darkest Dungeon level 2, hardest first impression. This is by far still the hardest first impression, because all you do is get 3 trinkets that say this will protect you from an ability called Revelation, and you're like, well, I have no idea what that ability means. So you put it on 3 characters, That is correct, you put it on 3 characters, not all 4. And maybe you can think, wait, if I only get on 3 characters, maybe I should like bring along someone who can guard. Well, it may not always be something that creeps into your mind right away. That being said, it is a long dungeon due to get 2 campfires, which is useful. However, the enemies in here are difficult. The Templars you must kill are also very difficult. And the dungeon isn't particularly small either, so you can actually spend some extra time walking around to other rooms you shouldn't be, and extra fights outside your campfires really do matter. So the hardness of fights, the fact you lose 3 trinket spots, which is huge at champion level. I mean, you're losing damage trinkets, HP trinkets, accuracy trinkets, all that stuff that'll help you kill these big guys quicker, are now no longer on you. And if that target without that guard gets hit by Revelation a couple of times, it's massive stress and massive damage and can lead quickly to an affliction before you even know what happens. Now, if you're thankful enough and you brought along a Jester, we can kind of talk about how you can curb that, but even with the Jester in first impression, would struggle if 2 Revelations landed on the same person one turn with no stress reduction trinkets on. So due to the fact that this is a room that requires you to find 3 locations, not 1, all 3 of those locations have special mini-bosses which are very difficult. And even the build up to those rooms are pretty difficult. I would say the second darkest dungeon by far is the first impression hardest. Now we're going to talk about the easiest, the hardest with knowledge / going through at least like 2 to 3 times. Darkest dungeon level 3, position 4, easiest. By far, Darkest Dungeon level 3 can be done probably the quickest and the easiest with some prior knowledge. If you take the path I've taken, I believe I can finish this dungeon about in well below, I think, 15 minutes. Once you have the path and you have a party that can handle the white cell stalks appropriately, such as a Hellion, a decent mark composition, even someone like maybe like a shield breaker or a post like that, if you're just able to kill the cell stalk even every other turn, this dungeon is somewhat a joke, to be honest. The fights, as I said before, aren't particularly hard if you know how to map them out. So there's a pathway where you can take about 4 or 5 fights, get to the final room, and you get a total of 4 campfires, which means you can be continuously buffed throughout the dungeon. And if you get a Hellion about a 40 or 50% crit rate, she can practically one-shot a Stalk. So Stalk spawns, she Iron Swans, it's gone, and even if she doesn't kill it once with a crit, by the second round she's doing enough damage where once again she can kill it off in 2 rounds every time. You never get teleported, super easy. For all those reasons, for how large the dungeon is, they actually allow an insanely easy path to get there and finish it out quickly. Darkest Dungeon level 4, position 3, medium. Final level to Darkest Dungeon is pretty disappointing. I kind of alluded to it in the first impressions video where you practically just walk in with a party comp. And the only reason why I put it slightly harder than level 3 is the sole fact I always take in 4 people and I always lose 2. If the final boss didn't make you lose 2 people if you play with 4, or if you don't always want to cheese it and one-shot it, which I will put in the video here, so please watch out for that. There is one point where I actually one-shot the boss and don't lose anybody, so that's really cool. That does require DLC, however, so if you're going to ask, it's a bunch of shard dust and a lever. Other than that, I've never worried about this fight too hard. I've never looked up, countless of data and all that, looking into the stats and the abilities. There's no mapping to do. You pretty much throw a party together that can maintain itself for about 15 minutes, get someone with a post, and this fight is practically done. It's very easy, and as I said, the only reason why it's not the easiest is because often I lose 2 people without trying to cheese it. Darkest Dungeon level 1, position 3, hard. Now we're going to get into the good stuff. The first Darkest Dungeon I put as the second easiest first impression, and it's really because of just, you're not sure how the Darkest Dungeon works yet, and it has a very linear map, but for the most part, it's actually an extremely hard dungeon. There's high levels of bleed in there, certainly high levels of stress damage in there, and the boss itself requires a party that doesn't necessarily always bode well for the rest of the dungeon. You can have a party great for the dungeon, get to the boss and be like, ooh, I don't have a good party for this. Or obviously you have the vice versa problem. I have a great party for once I get to the boss, however, I gotta get to the boss. And sometimes those occultists, those finger of deaths, and those stressful incantations, you can easily hit a death's door in a couple of turns, if not 1 turn with a couple of crits, or you can hit an affliction with a finger of death and a stressful incantation or 2. So between the stress damage, the physical bleed damage, which is 6 DOT by the way, not only do you get like rocked for a 20 crit, you then bleed for 6. You can lose over half your HP in one ability. If you don't have a super strong healer, you only get 1 campfire as well. You take a lot of fights and only get 1 campfire. Most of the other Darkest Dungeons give you at least multiple campfires. This one's like, you get 1. You fight a pretty hard boss if you don't prepare for the boss, or if you do prepare for the boss, you take on a pretty hard dungeon. So it's really got a nice duality that kind of makes you try to blend both, and it'd be pretty difficult to find a really great party sometimes. And finally, we get the Darkest Dungeon level 2, position 1, hardest. Yes. This dungeon not only is hardest on its first impression, it is the hardest in general in my honest opinion. And it really comes back to the fact that you have to hit 3 different rooms with 3 less trinkets. There will be some people out there who say you can do it without the trinkets, or you can leave one person without it. You don't need someone to guard, such as a Man-at-Arms or a Houndmaster. There are ways you can do that. You could bring along significant stress debuffs and also Jester. Between, let's just say, like 25% stress reduction and a Jester that obviously decreases stress you take, and if you have a campfire that also reduces stress by like 15%, theoretically the Revelations could do a lot less stress damage, but I don't think it's the safest option because you still take a good chunk of damage physically. The reduced stress damage you take and the reduced damage you just take will nullify Revelation damage. I still think it's worth to have somebody just to protect. It does make the dungeon last a lot longer though if you have someone who typically protects, like a Man-at-Arms. Man-at-Arms aren't bad at damage, but they're not particularly high damage dealers either. So the Templars have a lot of HP. You already have a Man-at-Arms. Typically you want to bring a Vestal because you're going to need a lot of heal. And those Templar also have a lot of HP, and even that one guy who's got the Stinger Stab who does 10 blight per turn. That's like an artery pinch, and also the damage on it can be anywhere between 9 and 20 according to the wiki. These things can pump out damage not only through Revelation, but also their basic abilities. They are something you certainly don't want to mess with. Now there are a couple of strategies where you can try to do like Mark comms, and the Houndmaster actually works fairly well here. They are Eldritch/Beast. So the Houndmaster gets some of that bonus damage, and then if you do a Mark with the Dog Bone, you can actually hit some considerable crits, but they still have well over 120 HP on a lot of them. So you gotta burst through almost like 200 to 250 HP per fight, and trust me, that gets pretty darn annoying when they have that much HP and they're doing that much damage when you don't have your best trinkets on either. The Darkest Dungeon, 2nd level, due to the lack of trinkets, it's still a long dungeon. You gotta take at least 9 fights, like maximum optimized path is 9 fights, which is very difficult. 3 of those fights being boss fights, which none of them are particularly easy, especially the double Templar fight. Let me know if these were your first impression and then overall thoughts. For the most part, I thought about these for a long time, and I think that these are about accurate. It's hard to say because everyone's first impressions are so different, but in the terms of overall difficulty, I find it pretty easy to stand behind all my sayings. The only one I could maybe be swayed on is that the last level of the Darkest Dungeon is easier than level 3, but I solely banked it off the fact that since I lose people, I count that as harmful. That's why the 4th level is technically a little harder, because you lose people. The 3rd level is almost stress-free. You pull up a map, you calculate the 6 fights, and then you're done. For that reason, level 3 is by far the easiest, probably even quickest to do, followed by the 4th. The 1st level can still give me issues to this day, and the 2nd one, I take that bad boy as slow as possible. I make sure all my T's and I's, got all that stuff going on, because there is very little room for error when you don't have all your trinkets, especially when you need someone to guard someone without the trinket on. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think down below.